Hey guys, we're down in the basement rec room. I figured I'd give you a little tour of the home theater setup, go through some of the decisions and the compromises that I had to make while putting this room together. The goal was to make a room that worked well for both movies and listening to music while keeping everything within a reasonable budget. So let's take a look. So the first thing we did when we were putting this room together was to mark out the approximate seating locations. And then we made a bunch of measurements and eventually settled on a screen size of 130 inches. We purchased the monoprice motorized tab tension white screen. It was very reasonably priced compared to competing models that were for sale locally. When the system is off, the screen retracts and is flush mount to the ceiling. And then when it is turned on, the screen will automatically descend to a pre-programmed height. It's not necessary, but it does help to alleviate the imposing screen in the room when nobody is using the system, so it is nice. So the next major decision was in terms of the projector, either a 1080p projector or a 4K projector. Remember 3 years ago the price difference was quite a bit. It would have cost me about $6,000 more to get a 4K projector, and even today the price difference is quite substantial. Problem is I had no 4K source material, so I really didn't see the value in spending the extra money. I ended up with an Epson 2040 projector, and it's been phenomenal. It cost me $700, and right out of the box it looked really good. Picture is sharp, colors are very bright. The only downside to this projector is the black levels are not as good as they could be. When you're watching really dark movies, it is quite noticeable, can get a little bit annoying, but other than that, everything else about this projector has been phenomenal. The other nice thing about this projector is the replacement bulbs are only $100, so you don't really mind if the kids burn through a couple hours watching cartoons. So once the decision had been made to go with a 1080p projector, I began shopping for other components and checked all the major brands. Eventually landed on the XMC1 by Emotiva. They were clearing out the 1080p versions when they introduced the 4K versions and offering $800 off the MSRP, as well as 10% off any other components you purchased at the same time. So I purchased the XMC1 and their 7-channel XPA Gen 3 amplifier, as well as a phono stage. So the XMC1 has been a great processor. It's marketed as an audiophile grade product. I really don't like the term audiophile. All I can say is it sounds good for, well, it sounds really good for both movies and music. It uses the Dirac room correction system, and I leave it in that mode when I'm watching a movie or when I'm streaming audio through USB to the DACs. If I'm listening to vinyl, I usually leave it in reference stereo, which means the analog input signal bypasses all the digital components and is passed straight to the amplifier. The XPA Gen 3 is a 300 watts, 2-channel driven amplifier, or 200 watts with all 7 channels driven. It has a switching power supply. There were a bit of concerns in the reviews, but again, I've never noticed anything in the amplifier. I do have a dedicated 240 volts circuit feeding this amplifier, and I'm not sure whether it's real or not, or if I'm just imagining it, but when I initially plugged it into the 240 volt outlet, I thought I noticed that it had a bit more jam to it. It just kicked a little bit harder. Again, it could be just the placebo effect. I'm never really sure about these things, but it did sound, to me, it did sound a little bit, had a little bit more power to it. So in terms of music, I also have a Music Hall 2.2 turntable. It's not the most expensive turntable out there, but it's still quite an improvement over the older turntables that I've heard. When it comes time to replace the stylus, this one has the 10. It's just the model number. I'll probably replace it with the 20 and see if I hear an improvement. Again, it's one of these things where the stylus will be slowly degrading over time, and so you'll be replacing an old worn stylus with a new stylus, and of course it'll sound better. Who knows if the improvement in sound is because of the new stylus that you put on or the upgrade in the model number, but I'll give it a shot just to see what it sounds like. So the speakers. My original intention was to do in-wall speakers, and behind the drywall there are vapor barrier bags and everything's all set and ready to go for in-wall speakers. But when I heard them, I was not really impressed. I heard a bunch of different brands. They all sounded flat. I don't like using terms to describe audio, but that's kind of the best I can come up with. So I made the decision to go with, traditional speakers in enclosures. Research a bunch of different brands. Unfortunately, here where I live, it's kind of a smaller city, and I'm really limited as to the products that I can actually go and listen to. So towards the end of getting all these pieces together, I went to listen to the Paradigm Prestige. They had a pair of 75Fs in the showroom. I was impressed with the sound, and so I eventually ordered the 95Fs for the fronts and the 55C for the center channel. The speakers look really good with the grills off, and ordinarily I would leave them like that. Unfortunately, I have small children, and I do not want to chance them pressing on one of the cones. Now, these speakers were purchased new. They were probably the most expensive component in the system, but again, being in a small city, really couldn't find anything locally that that was used and that I could go listen to. So where I saved in other locations, I splurged here. So to round out the surround speakers, I picked up a pair of bookshelves used. They're the Paradigm Studios for the rear channels, and for the side channels, again, a pair of Studio Dipoles. The bookshelves were about half off MSRP, and the dipoles were really good. They were about a third of the price, so I was pretty happy with them. So in terms of subs, I'm running stereo subs. They're SVS, they're the SB2000 models. They're the sealed subs. I was worried that they were going to be a little small for the size of the room, but they are more than sufficient to rumble the house. They've turned out really well, and they didn't have the model above when I was shopping around. So now, if I was to do it over again, I think I would probably go for the model up to 3000. That would probably be a better fit for the size of this room. And then finally, over to the right, we have a Chex Bubble Hockey. I was always looking for something to finish off the basement, and friends of mine suggested either a pool table or a foosball table or a ping pong table. The bubble hockey is a little bit more unique, and the timing just kind of worked out where there was one on Craigslist. It was a really good price, and it was in really good shape, so picked it up. And then lastly is the bar. Still working on it, no countertops, but those will come eventually. And in the corner is the automatic coffee machine. Again, another thing that showed up on Craigslist just as we were kind of designing the cabinets, and I thought, that would be really nice to have in the basement. Basically, press a button and it spits out coffee. It's fantastic. So in terms of upgrades, Emotiva does make a 4K, and they're working on a Adobe Atmos upgrade for this processor. I do have room in the cabinet for another amplifier, so it is possible for me to do the Atmos upgrade sometime in the future. I'm not sure how I'm going to configure the amplifiers. I could break out the front left and rights on monoblocks, or just get a 4-channel amplifier for the Atmos speakers. I'd also like to try and incorporate tubes somewhere in this setup. It'll probably be in the form of a tube preamp for the turntable. I'm still looking around. That's another one of these audio products that can get really expensive really quickly. So I'm still shopping, but that's next on the list in terms of upgrades. Alright, well, that about does it. Hope you enjoyed the tour. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you later.